So you hate women, right? I mean, that's the impression that I get from comments like this on my last video, but hyperbole aside, I understand why some fans don't love the direction that Scott Pilgrim Takes Off goes in, because it flips the source material on its head. Fandom culture and subverted expectations have not had a good run the last few years, from Game of Thrones and Last Jedi to now Scott Pilgrim. A lot of fans see subversion as a mockery or butchering of the source material that they're so fond of. But what if I told you that both The Last Jedi and Scott Pilgrim Takes Off are refreshing, insightful takes on otherwise stagnant franchises? Well, I'd be lying about one of them, but you'll have to keep watching to find out.
I'm here to take you to the future.
The future? How far in the future?
About 5 minutes, give or take.
I've got shit to do.
No.
So, what makes Scott Pilgrim Takes Off so comparable to the most controversial entry in the Star Wars franchise? Well, both of them are examples of throwing out fan expectations to attempt to re-examine the source material with a fresh perspective, for better and for worse. On paper, it sounds like a great thing for both IPs. Star Wars is a 45-year-old mega franchise that has established many tropes across media as a whole, and Scott Pilgrim hasn't had a new entry in the franchise since 2010. They're both primed for revisiting the original ideas and themes with a fresh new perspective. O'Malley himself said that he didn't want to just tell Scott's story over and over again, and Star Wars fans were left with a sour taste in their mouth after 2015's The Force Awakens, which was concerningly familiar to a lot of previous Star Wars stories.
Now, that's where the similarities end, but I'm going to say something that's going to piss off Star Wars fans on both sides of the fence regarding The Last Jedi, and that is that I genuinely believe The Last Jedi is a great science fiction movie, but it is a fucking abysmal Star Wars story. And that's because Rian Johnson throws out a bunch of established plot threads and internal logic to make his story work. That's not just his thing, that's a Disney Star Wars problem in general, but particularly with The Last Jedi. And so that results in the butchering of characters and stupid plot armor and just a bunch of loose ends that never get tied up. And maybe that's a video on its own? It's definitely a video on its own. But despite commenters like this saying stuff like Netflix wokeism, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off doesn't have the shortcomings that have plagued the recent era of Star Wars media. The rules of the game are still the same. So similar, in fact, that the first 24 minutes and 36 seconds of the show play out almost identically to the comics, which is what fans were expecting. And then Scott Pilgrim dies. This is the hard left that left the fanbase very divided. Some people thought it was insane to kill off your title character in the first episode, and others, like myself, were excited by the potential story opportunities that could come out of this change. Now, Scott's not actually dead. He does come back a couple episodes later, but he's in the show so little that it really allows it to step back and re-examine the source material through a new perspective. That is, Ramona's. And through Ramona's perspective, we get to explore her relationships with her 7 evil exes. And quite refreshingly, they're not really that evil. I mean, look, Gideon is still pretty evil, and Matthew Patel is like kind of evil, but ultimately they all end up being really well-rounded characters that get a lot of depth that we didn't get from the original material. Because Scott's no longer the focus, the entire ensemble gets a ton of time to explore themselves in a new perspective that isn't revolving around Scott Pilgrim's precious little life. Instead of focusing on Scott's journey from being a shitty human being to passable human being, the show takes this time to explore everyone else's journey without him. Pretty much everyone at least gets one moment in the limelight. I particularly love the moment where Kim and Knives get to bond together over Knives' love for music, and she gets to discover that she's actually kind of a musical prodigy, and that ends up being a pretty main point of the plot, and I really enjoyed that. That's not to say that it's all perfect, but I think the depth that is added to all of these characters makes the show a lot more enjoyable than just another retelling of the same Scott Pilgrim story. And the big thing that really makes this subversion of expectations a satisfying and exciting one is because there's some fucking foreshadowing. The original movie is actually really bad about foreshadowing some things, but really good about other things. But anyway, this video is not about that. But swapping Scott's iconic party icebreaker that we're all very familiar with.
Pac-Man?
I know of him.
Well, Pac-Man was originally called Puck-Man. They changed it because, not because Pac-Man looks like a hockey puck.
Scott gets a new line regarding Sonic the Hedgehog and his two different adaptations that were playing on TV in the 90s.
And the same guy played Sonic in both shows. Isn't that wild?
At first glance, this just seems like a minute change, a surface level joke about Michael Cera playing Scott Pilgrim two different ways, or even just an updating of Pac-Man's a little too retro now, so Sonic is now retro. But as you dive deeper into the show with its meta-commentary unfolding, young Neil's whole debacle with the Scott Pilgrim movie that they produced through the series, I think that line just gets more and more depth as you get further into the series. And I love that little detail. So as much as everyone expected Takes Off to just be another adaptation of Scott Pilgrim's adventures, I, for one, am very, very glad that it isn't. As O'Malley put it, who wants to revisit themselves at 25?
Wait, what are you still doing here? I took you out of the intro.
I haven't shot the intro yet. I need to do that.
Fuck. That makes a lot of sense.
It's almost like non-linear video editing is a thing that you do. You edited this video.
Anyway,
I'm cutting you off there for a second. That is me from the intro. I chose to wear that.
Enough comical banter to pad out the video. I'm from your future.
Yeah, no, I hadn't noticed with the whole other Josh on the floor.
The show is actually really, really bad. I have lots of very serious grievances with it.
Weird. That is not in the script, but since you're me, I'm going to assume you have a decent argument. Would you like a cup of tea?
Oh yeah, tea would actually be awesome. We don't have any water in the future.
We've got blueberry, raspberry, ginger with lemon, ginger without lemon, green tea with lemon, green tea with ginger, green tea with peppermint, peppermint tea without the green tea, liver destroyer, and chamomile. Oh, and sleepy time as well.
I'm pretty sure you made at least half of those up. But a liver destroyer sounds pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Chocolate Nuts is all sunshine and rainbows. Scott Pilgrim leaves some actual fucking skid marks, and he doesn't clean up after himself. The first episode in particular has really weird pacing. Although you're going at a breakneck speed going through all the story beats, some shots are just held for weirdly long periods of time, and even dialogue feels a little bit stilted with odd pauses in between.
Do you know this one girl with hair like this?
Ramona Flowers.
Ramona.
She's from New York City.
The Big Apple.
She moved here after a bad breakup.
And taking the focus away from Scott Pilgrim himself means that we now have an ensemble cast, and like with a lot of ensemble shows, some characters just don't get enough screen time, while some characters like Lucas Lee and Ramona, obviously, get plenty of screen time in development. Others, like the Kat and Huggy twins, get shafted pretty hard. That being said, I think Knives' arc is still really strong, just undercooked, like we didn't get all the steps of the recipe before we got to the final pie. And despite the brilliant animation, some of the voice cast doesn't perform as well as you would think. And funnily enough, Michael Cera as Scott, not very impressive. It's a good thing he doesn't get that much runtime, eh? And then right at the end, Knives gets her outfit from the comic where she's got the red highlights and the scarf and everything. It looks like a kind of badass Tumblr ninja. That just kind of comes out of nowhere. It's completely unmotivated and just felt like stupid fan service that didn't actually come from the plot. And then there's the whole super moment, like right at the end, that just feels like a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but it's also really hot. You know, there's naked energy lady in the sky, and
Santa, whenever you're done.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm gonna go watch season 2 again in the future, because we have that.
Oh, okay, when's that? You're going. Okay, cool, you just fucked off. That's really rude. I mean, more tea for me.